morning everybody, I'm Ruth and welcome to my channel, So Dysfunctional. I've just spent about an hour having my breakfast. My two children are at nursery today and it's 2 weeks till my little girl's 4th birthday. So today is the day I have to at least start, I don't think I'll finish, but start making her frozen dress for her birthday. So I spent a long time putting it off and now I have to get on with it. And I thought I would just take a little bit of film as I go along, show you some of the things I'm doing to make the dress. Obviously I've not got a pattern, so I'm just starting with a t-shirt pattern and I'm going to go from there. So if you want to see my progress and my process and how I get on with making the dress, please do stick around and yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, so here is my front and back. So this is just a basic t-shirt pattern. It's the Brindle Twig Ringer tee. I'll link that down below in the video. So what I've done so far is I have taken the side seams in a little bit to the waist. I measured, my daughter's waist comes to about 30 centimeters, so I've measured that straight across there and across there. So I've taken a little bit off the side seam, so it's just shaped in a tiny bit. It won't be very fitted to her because she'll want room to sort of boogie around in it, but just to give it a bit more shaping than just a straight t-shirt. And then, because I like to make life difficult for myself, on the front I've shaped the waistline. So this will be the stitching line and I've added 1 centimetre of seam allowance onto it. It's going to be, you know, the iconic blue Elsa dress, and on her dress obviously it comes down to quite a sharp sort of triangle point at the front, but I fear that if I try and attempt something like that it will just look a mess at the pointed bit of the bodice. So I'm just going to do a gentle curve so it's got a bit of shaping on the front, and then the same thing, she's got a sweetheart neckline yoke on her dress, and obviously the top bit's mesh. I'm not going to do mesh, but it's quite a pronounced sweetheart on her, and again a proper sort of pointed V in the middle. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to do a slight nod to it. So I'm doing a gentle sweetheart curve. So the next thing I need to do is chop the pattern down to the edge of the new side seam here and down across the bottom, and the same on the back. This second line here is to match up with the new line on the front bodice, and then I've got to chop this and add some seam allowance to the top and the bottom pieces, and then hopefully I should have the bodice pieces all ready. Okay, so first mistake of the day made. I should have known it would come this early. Stupidly I have done that as my cutting line and my stitching line, but of course I haven't factored in the seam allowance for the sleeve that will be going in. So if I do another seam here, there's going to be a seam about ½ centimetre above it, so that's going to be a nightmare. So I'm going to need to move this line down about 1 centimetre and then do my seam allowance from there instead. Okay, so here are my finished bodice pieces. I forgot, of course, that I had to do the same with the back, cut that across so that I'm going to have a different fabric for the main part of the bodice. So yeah, that's my 2 yoke pieces, front and back, and bodice pieces. Fingers crossed I have done that vaguely okay. So the next thing I have done is I drew off the stitching line of the bodice, front and back. Sorry, because the paper's curving, it's difficult to see, but that is straight across the back, and then this is the curved line of the front bodice. So I've written a note to myself here to add seam allowance when I've finished fiddling with the skirt patterns, but basically what I've done is, having measured my daughter from shoulder to her ankle, I think I did, or the floor, I've done a whole skirt piece just straight down top to bottom for the front and the back, and what I'm going to do is slash up this pattern in a couple of places and spread the pattern out so that I'm going to have some kind of A-line skirt. I decided, because I'm using a lycra fabric, I decided not to gather it at the waist because I thought that would make it quite bulky. So I'm going to just spread this and make an A-line shape skirt for the front and the back. So that's the next thing. So here are my skirt pieces. This is my skirt front and my skirt back. And as you can see, I slashed them 3 ways up each skirt piece and spread them out. This is always the bit I really hate because knowing how much you want at the bottom is just a bit of a guessing game, and with this I don't really want to get it wrong. I want her to have enough room to be able to roam around in it, but also not make it really heavy. So I'm hoping that I've put in enough fabric that it will hang okay and also be okay for her to move about in. So yeah, so all I've got left to do in terms of the pattern pieces now are the sleeves, and then I can start cutting out some fabric. What I should have said about slashing and spreading your pattern is that once you've cut up your main sections of the skirt and then spread them the distance you want them to be to make the hem the length you want, you then have to curve off the bottom and the top as well, just to give them a nice shape, because they'll be slightly clunky if you don't do that. It's a very kind of straightforward way of making an A-line skirt from just a rectangular piece. I'll try and find a tutorial for it or something online that I can post below. Here is my sleeve piece. So I've just shaped the hem of the sleeve so that it'll sort of come out to a slight point over the wrist. And I had a brief panic that I needed to take a centimetre in and therefore adjust the bodice, but actually, because I've used a t-shirt pattern, it's probably designed to be a little bit looser than I would imagine this kind of dress is going to be, but I'm just not going to worry about it because actually it'll be useful for her to have plenty of movement in it. So yeah, I'm just going to cut and hope that it'll be okay. My brain is a bit fried, so I'm going to go and have some lunch and then I'll come back and do a bit more later. I thought I'd just show you the fabrics that I've got for this. So this is the lycra that I'm going to use basically for the main body of the dress. It'll be used for the skirt and the main part of the bodice. I've got this sort of glued on sequins fabric just for the bodice part of the top. And then the yoke and the sleeves are going to be out of this silvery velvet, and then we've got this snowflake organza for the train on the back of the dress, which I have not yet sorted out the pattern for, but I think I need to think about that a little bit before I decide on what shape I'm going to cut it. So there's the fabric. I think it was generous of me to call this fabric velvet. I mean, it is completely man-made, no cotton in it at all, and it hates me. Look at it. It is molting everywhere. Oh. Okay, so here is the bodice piece. So you can see I've got the front and the back stitched at the shoulders. I put a bit of clear elastic into that seam just to stabilise it so it doesn't stretch out. And the sleeves I've sewn on flat because I haven't sewn up the side seams yet. I was at the point yesterday of pinning on the neckband, which I'd cut and prepared. Because I've used a t-shirt pattern for this, it's obviously quite a close fitting sort of crew neck style. And I do find sometimes that if the fabric isn't really stretchy, it's a bit of a struggle to get over the kids' heads. And actually, what I have found from working with this, apart from the fact that it sheds like crazy, which is why I'm trying to get it sewn up as quickly as possible, it's not as stretchy as I thought it was when I bought it. And I'm slightly worried that if I just stick with this neckline and this neckband, which is, I mean, it doesn't really help you to see how big it is, does it? She's 4, and I think we're going to struggle to get that over her head without a little bit of wiggle. So what I think I'm going to do is just take the shoulders in a tiny bit, just widen the neckline a little bit up to the shoulders, and I'll remake another neckband, and hopefully that'll be okay. Thinking about the styling of Elsa, the dress is sort of off the shoulder anyway. It wouldn't be a style that I would choose for my daughter because it'll probably really annoy her and keep slipping down, but a slightly wider neckband shouldn't be a problem. So that's next on the list. Okay, so I've just spent a bit of time. I made a new neckband, I sewed it on, and it just didn't look very good. So I have just turned under the edge of the neckband and stitched it down with a zigzag stitch so that it will stretch. Of course, because I chopped off some of the neckband out to the shoulder, it's now quite narrow. So I'm really hoping that I've got the balance right and it's big enough to go over her head, but not too big that it's going to fall off her shoulders. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Okay. I'm sorry, I've gone freehand for now because I just can't get my camera quite high enough, so I hope it's not too wobbly camera work. I have got to bite the bullet and cut out this train for the back of the dress, and I've decided, hopefully not completely madly, to cut it on the bias because I want the whole dress to be stretchy enough so that my daughter can just pull it over her head. I'm slightly worried that if I cut this on the grain that the fabric won't stretch with the rest of the dress, which is sort of lycra and everything else. So I'm cutting it on the bias so that hopefully the top part of this will stretch with the bodice of the dress, which it will be attached to. So this is the skirt back piece. I obviously need the train to be roughly the same as that, plus a bit extra because it goes round the front of the body slightly into the front bodice. So I've added that, that's the extra amount that it's going to go around the front, although of course actually it'll end up being this edge that will be the front because this is the fold here. So that's the extra for that. And then I've also then flared it out a bit more. Stand back a bit so you can see. Just so that it's basically got a little bit more room in it than the actual dress and the skirt of the dress itself. So it'll just hopefully float around a little bit on top. My plan, I've just had a little test with this. My plan is to bind the edge with this sort of sparkly blue ribbon. I will hopefully do the corners a little bit more nicely than that. It's actually quite stiff, so I think I'm going to go and stick it in the washing machine and see if that will soften up a little bit. But I think that'll just look a bit nicer than just kind of folding it over. And obviously I wouldn't sew it in black thread, that was just to wash it so it didn't unravel in the machine. But I think it'll look a bit nicer than just turning it over and hemming it. So yeah, so that's the plan with that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, cutting on the bias is not going to make it massively shifty. Anyway, I need to cut it out and then I'm going to hang it up on a hanger because normally if you cut stuff on the bias, it will drop a bit. So I'm going to cut it out, hang it up on a hanger, see if that happens. It may not because it's completely man-made fabric. So we'll see. And then I can get on with making up the rest of the dress. Well, if any of you were screaming at me whilst I was doing that last little bit, you would have been screaming at me with good reason, because having put that piece down and cut it out, literally the second I put my cutter down, I realised that I had forgotten to factor in the extra length of the back bodice. So I basically cut a back skirt length piece. But of course the train comes from the bodice. So I have just about enough fabric to recut it, except this is not quite as long as this one, so I'm hoping that it will still wrap around to the front. Oh, what an idiot. Right, here is the bodice front and bodice back pieces, and I have just zigzag stitched the lycra and this sequiny fabric together so that they won't shift when I'm sewing these pieces together and everything else. It's not a perfect job. The lycra's kind of pulled in a little bit, but hopefully once they're all sewn into the seams, it'll pull out okay. So the next job is to sew these together at the side seams and then the skirt pieces as well, and then to attach them all. So hopefully I'll have bodice and skirt all in one piece, and then I just need to sew the top on with the train sandwiched in the middle. So I've got the bodice and the skirt sewn together now. This seam isn't stretching as much as I hoped it would, but I think it's possibly because of the stitching I used to join the sequin and the lycra on the bodice. So if I find when my little girl puts it on that it's a bit of a struggle to get it over her body, I might go in and try and unpick some of that zigzag stitching in the bodice, but hopefully it won't be a problem because I have left some ease in it, so it should be okay. So the next thing to do is to bind the edges of the train and just check it's going to be a good length. So yeah, that's the next project. It's going to take me a bit of a while, I think. As I expected, that has taken me ages, but I have pinned all of the ribbon around the edge of the fabric. I've just taken this ribbon and pressed it in half and then pinned it all around and sort of vaguely done a mitered corner at each side. So the next job is to sew it. Okay, so that is done. I've bound the outer edges and the hem of the organza. I don't mind admitting that I was quite nervous about that. I don't know why, I just was. So I'm really pleased that that is finished. The next thing to do is to hem the dress, I think. So let's bring this over here. So I've stitched a 1/4 of an inch all the way around the bottom of the hem, and then I've not that lycra likes pressing that much, but I've pressed it up and then I'll roll it up again and stitch that down. I tend to find with round hems that it helps to just stitch round and press up on that before then turning it under again, otherwise it can get a bit sort of folded over on itself sometimes. But first I need to go and have something to eat because I'm hungry and I can't do a hem while I'm hungry. Okay, so I've hemmed the skirt and I have just pinned the organza train round the top, the back bodice. So it goes round slightly from the front on both sides and then across the back. And I'm just going to attach all those together with a long running stitch so that I can then attach the velvet top bit. I have to say, I bought a walking foot fairly recently and it has been absolutely brilliant. I haven't pressed this out yet, so it needs a bit of a press, but my goodness, it made doing that lycra really easy, which I did not think it would. So top tip, if you can afford it, because they're not cheap. I waited a little while to save up to buy one. Get yourself a walking foot. They are great for fabrics that want to shift everywhere. So there we are. I just tacked on the train onto the top of the blue bit of the dress and then attached the silver yoke onto the rest of the blue dress and we're done. I'm so pleased it's worked out well as I could have hoped, I think. It's not actually a very good colour. It's much more of an aqua colour than it's coming up on the screen. I'll just flip it around and show you the back. So there's the back. I just need to decide if I might put a few sparkly bits on the front of the actual skirt or not, but I probably won't do that, so I think I'm done. Hooray! So that's my dress all finished. I'm so pleased it is done. I really hope that it fits and that she likes it. Fingers crossed. I will leave a link down below for the Brindlin Twig Ringer Tee pattern, which was the pattern I used as my starting point. And I'll also try and find a blog or two talking about slashing and spreading patterns, which is what I did for the skirt, in case anyone wants to look at any more info about that. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please do leave me a comment or a question if you've got any about any of the processes. I'll try to answer anything if things weren't clear. I'm sorry about the slightly shaky camera work halfway through. I gave up on my tripod because it was just not working very well. Hopefully you can use some of these ideas to make your own dress. Doesn't have to be a frozen dress, could be any kind of dress, I suppose. And yeah, as I say, do ask any questions if you're not sure about any of the things that I did. Please do like this video if you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see when my next video comes out. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye!